So as they're sitting down, Mindy, I figured, where are you? You might be. So Lindsay, right there, is a member of the PEAS Community Assistance Panel run by the Federal Public Health Agency, ATSDR, for the ongoing PEAS trade toward water contamination issues. She's also a co-founder of the Community Action Group New Hampshire Safe Water Alliance and is engaged in local, state, and federal public health policy. Mindy Mesmer, right here, has been an environmental consultant for 30 years and a small business owner for 20. She was elected to the New Hampshire State House of Representatives in 2016, representing Rye and Newcastle, after exposing a pediatric cancer cluster in these communities. She has worked tirelessly to accelerate PFAS remediation at the Copley landfill in Northampton. Some of you may know about that. Expose PFAS contamination elsewhere in New Hampshire, especially around the St. Gobain plant in Merrimack, and also working to pass important legislation to protect drinking water from arsenic and PFAS and prevent cancer. Mindy's a founding member of the New Hampshire Safe Water Alliance and a consultant to the Union of Concerned Scientists. Megan Romano is an assistant professor of epidemiology at Dartmouth's Geisel School of Medicine. Dr. Romano's research explores the influence of exposure to environmental endocrine disrupting chemicals using the sensitive windows of pregnancy and gestation of maternal and child health. Her research is primarily focused on the effects of environmental chemicals commonly found in food, water, and consumer products in the United States. I've decided not to try to pronounce some of those. Flame retardants I can easily do, and phthalates, well, anyway. So, and Jen Dugan there in the red is the Vice President Director of the Conservation Law Foundation in Vermont. Throughout her career, Jen has worked to protect public health and ensure all communities have equal access to a clean and healthy environment. Before joining CLF, Jen was the General Counsel for the Vermont Agency of Natural Resources. One of the things I want to say, just before I turn it over to Mindy and the panel, is that this will be shown, and this format will follow in April 1st in Lebanon. It's going to be at the Lebanon Masonic Lodge, and we will be promoting that as well. But you know, if you think that there are people in your lives who need to see this, I would suggest sending them over there. So, Mindy.
Okay, so we have very real PFAS issues here in the state of New Hampshire, which is what has really brought us to develop this process, this screening program, and bring it across the state. We really need the help of people everywhere across the state in this area. We have a well shut down on the seacoast. The biggest well, the supply well at PEAS, was shut down in 2014. 3,000 people were exposed with high levels of serum PFAS levels in their blood. The second largest well was shut down about a year ago in Hampton from the Copley landfill, in part, spewing PFAS into 5 towns on the seacoast. I got involved with this, like Susan said, when I identified a cancer cluster, and actually a double cancer cluster in our children of 5 towns in the seacoast. I contend that 3 times the expected rate of brain cancer is probably connected to it as well in our children. So New Hampshire has we also have a very large exposure release going on that has just been, in the last few months, acknowledged by the state as being a 65 square mile area of the central portion of our state in Merrimack, Litchfield, Bedford, which has been impacted, the drinking water has been impacted by emissions coming off of St. Gobain, an industry that makes the coated fabrics, the Kevlar fabrics, and the Gore-Tex fabrics using PFAS coating. And they came here from Bennington, and maybe Jen can tell us a little bit about that, in 2002, because we had more lax regulations. New Hampshire wasn't going to make them put catalytic converter air emission controls on their stacks, and they were going to save $50,000 a year per stack to come here. So they packed up in Vermont after contaminating Vermont, and coming over here, and then proceeded to continue to contaminate here. So we have people in the state of New Hampshire, 27,000 people live in the Merrimack area that we think are potentially impacted by this as well. So this is a big New Hampshire issue. And one of my bills last year that passed, that was signed into law, has started a process, what's called rulemaking here in New Hampshire, where the DES, our Department of Environmental Services, has to come up with standards for 4 of these PFAS chemicals. We have 2 already, but we have to have 4 enforceable standards for 4 of them. Out of the 4,700 that we know exist right now, we're only going to look at regulating 4. So we're way behind the times. And companies like DuPont and Saint-Gobain, that's where they want us. And they fight every step of the way. When we have public hearings, Lindsay and I can talk about that a little bit, when we are talking about protecting public health, because New Hampshire has not only a pediatric cancer cluster on the seacoast, but we have the highest rates of breast cancer in the country. We have the highest rates of bladder cancer in the country. We have the highest rates of esophageal cancer in the country. And we have the highest rate of children getting cancer in the country here in New Hampshire. So this is a very real issue here in New Hampshire. We know that at least 50% of cancers have some sort of environmental exposure component that could be prevented with stronger regulation, which is something I've been working on in the State House. But we need the help of people like you, because every step of the way, the lobbyists from 3M and DuPont and Saint-Gobain are here in our state lobbying against our efforts to protect public health. Literally, 3M submitted a 26-page document saying there's no health effects from PFAS. And so why would you want to be stricter on environmental regulations? And basically, New Hampshire has decided to fall in line with the EPA's advisory, which we contend is not protective enough at all. So we need your help. Those 3 items on that sheet of paper, it's really, really simple to sign the petition. If you just go to that link, and you just put in your name, first name, last name, your email, and your zip code, and hit send, and your name will be on the petition. If you want to do more, there are 2 other things where the tool is very easy for you to just write an email, and it talks about the facts that you can use if you want to. So we need people to help. We are very fortunate here in the state of New Hampshire that we have 4 federal delegation representatives that are very supportive of this effort. Senator Jean Shaheen in particular has been a real fighter for this for years with us, and she has given me a statement to read at the beginning of this, every one of these presentations, so I'd like to read it to you. It says, "I wish I could join you for this evening's event. Please know that I'm with you in spirit as you screen The Devil We Know, a documentary that chronicles the efforts of a West Virginia community to get the facts about their exposure to toxic chemicals. Thank you to all the event organizers and sponsors for raising awareness of this very important issue. The presence of chemicals like PFAS in our environment extends the scope of this issue past Parkersburg and into so many communities across the country, including right here in New Hampshire. In the Granite State, we are making strides in determining the health impacts of PFAS in our drinking water, and this progress is a testament to advocates at the local level who demand accountability and transparency. We need enforceable drinking water standards that maintain consistency and safety levels from state to state. Please know that I will continue to do all I can at the federal level to develop policies and strategies like the PFAS Proof of Concept Study at PEAS that confront the challenges that these chemicals pose to our affected communities. Thank you for everyone for attending, as it will be citizens like you who continue to raise awareness about this very important issue. I wish you all the best in your future endeavors. Sincerely, Jean Shaheen." So with that, I think we should open it up to any questions anyone has. Jen's an attorney, Lindsay and I are scientists, and Lindsay has been really involved with PEAS, and as you know, Megan's a physician, which I'm going to be looking for your letter. I'm sorry. I'm going to be looking for your letter though on that tool. But
I'm guessing that the EPA is not very helpful.
Not at all.
Particularly the last 2 years.
Yeah.
And when the movie was being made, they talked about there was a connection with somebody who was head of the EPA that was related to DuPont. But what about nowadays? I mean, well, before Trump, how was it?
Before Trump, it wasn't much better, to be honest. But it's definitely not gotten better now. Andrew Wheeler is the head of EPA right now, and he's a co-lobbyist. And a couple of weeks ago, there was a bunch of hoopla around oh, the EPA is going to put out their plan for PFAS, and they made a big deal out of it, and then the plan came out and it was literally nothing. No commitment to make it hazardous waste or do things that we need them to do to make it easier for us in the states. The states really have to take this on because we're not getting anything out of the EPA. And I don't know if anybody else wants to comment.
Yeah, I would just add, we're, DuPont and 3M, really were aware of the risks since the
For
60s.
decades.
But EPA has known since the early 2000s. And we're talking about, we're now in 2019. It's been throughout various administrations that they have failed to take action. And this most recent plan, there was zero commitment to really set drinking water standards.
Yeah.
So I think that Minnie is right. I mean, thankfully, states are beginning to act. The Vermont Senate 2 days ago just unanimously passed legislation that would set drinking water standard for a group of PFAS so that we move away from this chemical by chemical regulation. And that legislation also directs the agency to evaluate how to regulate the entire class of PFAS, the subclass of PFAS. And so it's going to be up to the states to take leadership to protect drinking water.
How is our governor going to take care of his citizens? Sununu.
Well, he is beholden to the Business and Industry Association that is not in favor of this whatsoever because the top members of BIA are Saint-Gobain and other industries that have polluted areas of the state. So while he claims to be a scientist, it's a difficult road that I continue to try to work with him on. I try to put him into the press in a certain way that he has to do something that we want him to do, and that makes him do it usually. But I also got him to say that he's going to start a council to look into the elevated cancer rates. And then when I spoke to him at Martin Luther King Day breakfast, he said that he's looking at whether or not the rates really are that high. And I said, well, the CDC has determined that, so what are you going to say to the CDC? I mean, so, it is a difficult path, and we do need to get a new governor who takes this really seriously.
He's got a degree in environmental engineering, doesn't he?
He says that, yeah.
Yeah.
We know that the water is ketones.
Do the individual municipalities test their water for these? So
It's not required right now for New Hampshire for all municipalities to test their water. That's something we want to change. Actually, we're looking at it with CLF to try and do something about that next session.
Yeah, so CLF filed petitions in all of the New England states to require, to ask the agencies to do rulemaking to set a standard, and part of having a standard means testing, so that you know what concentrations are in the water, and then if it's above a certain level, then you have to treat them. And so in some cases, the state granted that petition, or parts of our ask. And in other cases, the legislature, we are pursuing legislation to do what needs to be done where states are not, state agencies are not stepping up to take action.
The state of New Hampshire's response was a one-page rejection of that petition. So we have a little bit of room to work there.
And another important piece of the drinking water testing is that about 40% of the residents in the state of New Hampshire get their water from private wells. So one of the things that the Superfund research program at Dartmouth is doing is developing some community outreach programs to help people understand what they should be testing in their well water, how often they should be doing that testing, and what to do when they find that there are contaminants. Arsenic has been our main focus in the Superfund research program so far, but we are moving into the area of looking more into the perfluoroalkyl substances.
But in my town in Rye, they didn't sample for PFAS, but the residents made them do it, so they did it. So You can push to have your city water supply, your municipal town, whatever water supply sampled and make them do it.
There's a question over here, and then over here.
So, I'm pretty sure we can get Hanover to test water for this. Hanover's very environmentally, concerned, but then what I'm worried about is, so we find out it's in our water, then what do we do? Can we drink bottled water? How do we know it's not in our bottled water?
I'll take a stab at that one. So there are inherent problems in bottled water as well, just because we know that all plastic essentially leaches. And so I live in the town of Portsmouth. We're kind of at ground zero in terms of a pretty significant contamination issue. It's both in the water at the Peace Trade Port and our municipal wells. So we live in a town where they do test every month. They sample for 26 different PFAS compounds. They regularly find about 8. And what I did was just actually paid for a private company to do testing on the water coming out of my tap, just to sort of give me a little bit more confidence about what the issue was and how best to deal with it. And then I had a reverse osmosis system installed. My stepdaughter has 3 little kids. She had a similar system it's called a whole house carbon filtration filter. So that's another way that you can effectively remove these types of compounds from the water that's coming into your home.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, right over there.
I haven't paid enough attention to the upcoming 2020 election, but are some of the candidates talking about the water issue?
They sure are, yeah. In
Okay.
fact, Mindy and I tomorrow at 11 o'clock are going to be meeting with the New York Senator Kirsten Gillibrand. She's from the state of New York. Hoosick Falls, New York had a really significant contamination, PFAS contamination. And so, yeah, I think it's an issue that's on a lot of candidates' talking points. People,
And if not, we're gonna make it that.
yeah, exactly.
And I mean, is New Hampshire one of the leaders in going after this? The state of New Hampshire?
It was first shut down. The first place I believe in the United States was Pease, where it was detected and shut down the well.
And then we've read a lot about Michigan, but
Michigan, yeah, is
Yeah.
another, huge
Okay.
issue.
I think it's really, I would say it's probably in most states. I mean, what we're finding in Vermont is that where we are looking, where we're testing for it, we're actually finding it. And so just to kind of give example of the challenges associated with this contaminant, we have found it in several Vermont schools where there's no other source around the school that's a manufacturer or an industrial. And PFAS is in floor products, it's in cleaning products. And so what's happening is that, products that are used in these schools go down the drain, and they are, their septic field is very near where their groundwater well is for drinking. And so that well is being contaminated. So there are multiple, what makes them such a challenge is, they are really the, public health perfect storm, because they are toxic in very small quantities, they are persistent in the environment, they are highly mobile in water, so contamination spreads quickly. They are found in many different industrial processes and in products. So there are multiple pathways for exposure. So where I think it's probably, it's not really limited to any one state. It really is, a national problem, a global problem.
And if you,
Did you have a question?
Yeah,
And then,
so we saw images throughout the movie of Patagonia and other products, and the pans, and so has there been any effort to try to figure out some ways for those companies to also help with this effort? And then part 2 of my question is, so should I not use a non-stick pan and stop wearing clothes, and what am I supposed to do now?
Well, some companies are stepping up, like Patagonia, you mentioned, they're not gonna use PFAS products anymore. And Timberland, I think, is another one. There's a few of them that are starting to do it, but, I think our best, this comes up now every time we come to a town, And so I'm gonna put out a list on email. If you sign up for any of these actions, you'll get emails from us. And I'll put out the list of products we know that most likely contain these chemicals, so you can avoid them. And no, I would not use a Teflon pan. I haven't used one in 20 years since they. Well, that's the other problem. It's kind of a hazard. I mean, we don't want to put it in the landfills, but it's not safe to use it. I don't think so.
So do you just keep it up in your attic forever, or what's the best thing to do?
Yeah. I mean, use it as a planter or something. I don't know, but I wouldn't use it.
But you wouldn't put it in you wouldn't throw it out?
What do you guys think?
I mean, yeah, that's a hard question to
really hard
answer.
question to answer,
It's going to leach in a landfill too. I don't know the answer to that. It's a good question.
Another piece of the consumer products component of this, Ken Cook was featured throughout the documentary, and he heads up Environmental Working Group, which actually has a wonderful website with a wealth of resources for consumers if you're interested in drinking water filters, in where you can find safe cosmetics. They show up in our waterproof mascara and other places, and things that we're using on our bodies every day. There's a lot of really helpful guidance on that website. It's called Environmental Working Group. I believe it's ewg.org.
Sir, did you have a question?
My question is this, I guess in light of the fact, if I'm not mistaken, it's the same company involved in both Hoosick Falls, North Bennington, and now in New Hampshire. And is the problem with motivating the EPA, I mean, it's obviously interstate commerce, so seems like a federal issue. Is the problem with motivating the EPA? Or what, maybe you don't know.
I think it's just lack of regulations at the state and federal level.
Given what that picture looks like, it would be a kind of a no-brainer that the EPA should be strongly involved in it. I mean, doing this thing piecemeal, state by state is.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that's really difficult about this is that we live in a free market economy and it's business friendly. And at times, and most times, it's in direct tension with protecting the health of the public. And if there's ever sort of a perfect case illustrating it, it's this. And so both at the federal level and at all the state levels, it's really hard to get regulations that are strict. The businesses are powerful.
So probably one last question, Carol.
Are the products that have this material, are they labeled? Are they required to label that it's in there?
No,
Like
it's
Windex or
incredibly
whatever?
difficult. It's actually, even when you know a lot about it, they're incredibly difficult to avoid. I wish I had better.
Go back to
advice
baking
for
soda?
you.
Yes,
Actually, yes, as clean as you can.
Vinegar, baking soda,
lemon juice.
and waxed dental floss, not Glide.
Not Glide.
Yeah.
Really?
And this is just one product that we're talking about out of so many different chemicals. But my particular interest is micro plastics, how the microplastics are breaking down, and basically water companies don't have a fine enough filter to get at and so we are all drinking water, whether we're drinking bottled water or water from our faucets, we're drinking water that has microplastics in it. And what is the impact of that? And it would seem that most water companies don't have a fine enough filter, but it's there. And so bottled water is found with it, and tap water is found with it, and it's just everywhere. And what is the implication of that? It's just there are so many things that are lurking out there. It's hard not to feel like a paranoid,
Well, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think that this really illustrates the sort of the failures of the way that we regulate chemicals. Our regulatory system, our laws, are essentially set up to shift the burden to a government agency or a citizen to prove that something is unsafe, rather than having a manufacturer prove that it is safe.
Right.
And recently there were some improvements made to our federal chemical safety laws that may help prevent some of this going forward, but there are thousands of chemicals that have been grandfathered in that we are now going to have to deal with as sort of legacy contaminants in the environment. So it really requires a systems change.
In the meantime, though, I think the other point that's worth making is that if there's an issue that you care about, I think it's really important to contact your elected officials. And interestingly, I met Mindy several years ago because my son was attending daycare at Pease, so he was exposed to this water for 4 years. It's something I care deeply about. I work with a couple of other folks who were in a similar situation. Mindy was about to go into the State House. We met, we worked on legislation together. Earlier this week, we were testifying, we were providing comments to the Department of Environmental Services due to the legislation that she wrote a couple of years ago. Likewise, this is the letter from Senator Shaheen. We've contacted her, we've said, we have a huge problem here and we really need your help. And you wouldn't believe how responsive they've been. So I'm very encouraged by the extent to which if you involve yourself in the democracy, things can happen that are really positive. So I think we do need a systems change, there's no doubt. But I also think that if there's issues you care about, get on the internet and contact your elected officials.
I live in Lebanon, I've written the water department, they had no idea about microplastics in the water. And started to pursue it and found that their filters wouldn't, it was too small to actually be picked up by the filters. I contacted the New Hampshire Department of Water Safety or whatever and talked, and it was like they didn't know anything about it. I feel like I was reading about it everywhere, about microplastics in the water, and it's like these people who are in charge of it had no concept of this being a problem. It was very, very disturbing.
But one thing linking back to the, speaking up and voicing, your concern about things, you do that all the time. So, good on you, and please keep going. If there are people who still have questions, I know, Jennifer, sir, you do have a question. These ladies may well hang out, but I also feel like I need to do the official close. And anyone who needs and wants to leave, go ahead, and then it's up to you as to how long you want to stay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If you get that sheet of paper, there are more back on the table. I can't emphasize enough how what Lindsay is saying is true. The more we speak up, the more we educate our water people. I mean, we've been educating them all along the way. So participation is so critical right now.
So if we signed up with our email, we'll get.
Yes, I'll put you in. Yeah.